interesting you bring up the hostage swaps during the Cold War. And I see what you're saying or what Spalding is saying, but at the same time, those were people you were exchanging spies, but Meng Wanzhou is a businesswoman, and
right.
The Michaels are not spies, according to everybody except the Chinese government.
Right.
So, is this a more worrying thing if this continues to happen in the future? Are just ordinary people? I mean, I guess you could say that Michaels aren't exactly ordinary people, but neither of them at the time had official government position, etc., get involved in this.
Yeah, I mean, this happens in other places. I mean, one of the most extreme examples that we saw while we were working on the book this past summer, there was this Ryanair flight over Europe, and it contained, pro-democracy enemies of the authoritarian regime of Belarus. They scrambled their air force and they brought the plane down in Belarus and brought these guys into custody. I mean, that was just the most extreme example of what scenario you're just describing, like the next steps. I mean, the Michaels were pulled out of their hotels or off a street or out of a restaurant. Who knows? I mean, maybe one day they'll tell us. But whereas, we saw, this whole sense that, Joe Biden called the Michaels when he first met with our Prime Minister Trudeau after Biden became president. He called them bartering ships, in this whole, thing. And that's basically the challenge for Western governments now, is to try to adjust to these new rules, try to create some momentum against it somehow, either political or shame it somehow, or find a political way to put an end to it. But it's a live issue. I mean, people can get picked up and used as hostages. And it's not the same as the Cold War, where I'm grabbing your spy, you're grabbing my spy, and we swap them. It's not the same, but it is. There's a certain parallel there that Spalding made, which is interesting.
Well, in the 21st century, ordinary citizens are poker chips, and you're absolutely right. People should be worried, right? They should be worried. Canadian businessmen going to China should be worried because, the old rules don't apply. It's actually one of the reasons why the Canadian government, when they were sort of trying to figure out how to deal with this, introduced a resolution. I think they've got 65 countries now, something like that, who've signed on to it. Basically saying this kind of behavior isn't on. We don't approve of it. I think the next step is to say, and okay, if you play this kind of game, we're going to subject you to sanctions. We're going to penalize you. When that plane went down or was taken down in Belarus, and those people were taken off. There wasn't the sense of outrage that there should have been. We could have gone after. There are 5 banks in Belarus that account for something like 70% of all financial transactions in that country. We should have put sanctions on them and said, you play this game, you are going to really pay for it. Instead, it was kind of a slap on the wrist. So I think, part of the challenge for Western democracies is to get serious here when this kind of thing happens, because, if you're going to do business, and you want to do business, everyone is at risk. The Australians have discovered that. Other countries have discovered it. And I would say, it will happen to Americans as well. And it does happen to Americans.
I think there's always this fear among Western countries of having a bad relationship with China, this fear of angering China, as if if a Western country were to do that, then that country would face some sort of major crisis. And of course we want to have friendly relations with everybody, right? But then there are consequences to that, right?
Well, I'd sort of put it the other way around. I mean, I'd say, if China wants to continue to do business with the West and to attract, Western investment and to sell its goods and services and to be part of global value chains, they got to play by these rules too, right? That extends into, other kinds of comportment as well. When it comes to, stealing intellectual property and trade secrets and cyber attacks. I mean, it's, that's all contributing to, what we would call difficult and fractious relations. And you're right that and I think it's certainly been true in Canada. There's been a desire not to rock the boat too much with China. When we're upset about human rights, to use so-called quiet diplomacy, not to take the megaphone, so that we can continue to do business with China. But I think China of today, and this is fairly obvious, is very different, from China of 20 years ago, and it's flexing its muscles in all kinds of ways. And I think this whole episode is yet another manifestation of that.
Do you think, because what you said, Fen, is absolutely right in that China should be facing some consequences if they want to behave this way, and they should be facing consequences for all the things you talked about, but it doesn't really seem that they are facing a lot of negative consequences now. In your reporting for the book, did you guys find that China had faced a lot of negative consequences for what they did to the two Michaels?
Nothing that had any bite. And just getting back to this, Fen alluded to just a moment ago, it's a declaration on arbitrary detention in state-to-state relations. Very Canadian.
A mouthful.
Yeah. So Canada went around, Canada needed support. They needed other countries to step up and say, hey, what they did to the Michaels is bad. Help us out. Speak out. So they got 50 up to like 65 countries now, including the US, saying, yeah, this is a bad thing. You can't do this. And a lot of the other countries signed on we're signing on because North Korea grabbed a bunch of our people, or Russia's taken some of ours. And so they did this declaration. It's a very sort of typical, almost quintessential Canadian move on the world stage. We try to bring a bunch of people together and create something new. I mean, this was done out of pure necessity, political necessity. This time, it was the Canadian government needed to go and find some friends and some allies and kind of put it together that way. The parallel is, 30 years ago, Canada spearheaded this landmines treaty to ban landmines, which eventually got a lot of support, and it created this stigma. Even though the U.S. didn't sign the treaty, be that as it may, it created this stigma that landmines are bad, they're evil, they maim and dismember children and turn them into, paraplegics and all of that. So this is part of an effort to start a movement that says it's really bad to kidnap people for your political ends, to try to, leverage a state-to-state negotiation, or do better in a trade deal, or whatever, or get my court case dropped against my national in another country. And the problem with it is there's no real sanction, there's no real teeth to it yet. I mean, this could evolve into something that, turns into, it'll be automatic sanctions, becomes an actual treaty. It tries to stamp this stuff out. Who knows? But that's, and China just laughs at this. They just scoff at it and say, you've got 50 countries and there's another 50 that didn't sign it, and most of them are too chicken to do it.